If you've been a fan of my channel for some time, you know that I love to review peripherals, particularly ones related to gaming or audio equipment, typically with gaming. So I have got another unboxing and review for you guys today. This is the, let me get my camera here for you. This is the DARKWALKER Shotpad Touchpad game controller. It's a mouthful, but it does some very interesting things if promised. We're going to find out as I unbox and review this for you guys. I want to be clear, I did receive this as a review copy. I think I'm a pretty straight shooter, but please keep that in mind as you make your own opinion on what I'm about to tell and show you. So, what makes this thing so different, as I slowly open the box, than everything else that exists on the market? Well, it is not replicating a traditional controller. Instead, it is emulating keyboard and mouse support in a controller form factor. As such, there is a limited set of games that are supported with this. I'm reading off of their website. It says that it's only compatible with games that have keyboard and mouse support. So make sure if the game you want to play with this doesn't support keyboard and mouse support, this will not work. You're going to aim with a touchpad instead of a joystick, and there are 13 different buttons which replicate mouse clicks. So I took it out of the box here. It is it is a wired USB connector here. And here's the actual control. I'm gonna hold it up to the camera so you can see it for just a second. On the back, there are some additional buttons here. You can see we have the shift and a space and alt, which replicates exactly those commands. And then there are a litany of buttons across the top. Here you have, if you're looking at the top here, you have your shoulder buttons, which are going to replicate your left and right mouse clicks. You also have a Q and an E, which are mapped to the Q and E on your keyboard. And then across the touchpad, you have a Z, an X, and a function key. And then you have your C, R, V, and F keys mapped as well. There is a D-pad here. There is a tab button with some other menu buttons around the circle. There is an analog stick. And there is also a scroll wheel right here as well, which, I don't know if you can hear that, actually has a click to it. Touchpad actually has a click to it as well. So the form factor of it is very, very different than just about anything I've ever seen, which is why when I was contacted to do a review for this, I was so excited because I was like, wow, I've never actually seen anything like this before. A lot of times you find products that are trying to emulate keyboard and mouse support in the form factor of it's still a keyboard and a mouse, but it's smaller. Maybe it's a lap tray. Maybe you hold the mouse at a different angle. I've seen a couple different iterations of that, but I've never seen somebody actually take keyboard keys and jam them all into a controller with an analog stick support. The idea is when you are playing this, you are, instead of using a traditional controller with the two analog sticks, your right thumb, your left thumb is going to be here to move your character, right? But your right thumb is going to be utilizing the touchpad to aim, which replicates the mouse input. So instead of using your mouse as you normally would in a first-person shooter, instead you're going to be moving your thumb. On the back, your traditional keys that would be defined for jumping, which would be like space, or traditionally shift, which is sprint, will be back here. So you're holding these buttons while you're using your analog stick and while you're using the touchpad to aim. There's also a litany of buttons across the side and mouse buttons across the top as well, all of which together should, in theory, basically take the idea of putting your hands on the WASD keys with your thumb on spacebar and maybe your pinky over on Q or tab and your right hand on your mouse with your left, right, maybe some thumb buttons, and getting rid of all of that and putting it in a form factor that you could hold and sit on your lap and play a game that way. So the key is to find a game that I am good with on keyboard and mouse, play a little bit of it, then switch over to this, see how seamlessly this connects and understands the inputs, and then try it out. And I'll be trying it on all these platforms. It says it supports PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, PC, Steam, Xbox One, and Xbox Series SX, which maybe is kind of the same thing now under the new Microsoft, naming convention. On the website, it does include a list of games that are supported on both the Xbox side and on the PlayStation side. And thankfully, Call of Duty is one of those supported games, which I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I've played a game or two of Call of Duty in my day. Deep Rock Galactic is also one that I'll probably check out, and then maybe even Halo Infinite or Halo Master Chief Collection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a jump cut here, and we're going to come back after I've had a couple days to play with this thing. I just wanted to show the box. There's really not much to it. Just like I said, a basic manual, mostly just a controller. We'll talk a little bit about the form factor and feel. Does it hold up under testing in a few days? And how do I like the games that I played with it? So we're going to do a jump cut, and we will be right back. And we're back seamlessly for you. For me, about a week since I first put together the unboxing portion of this video. I want to spend some time talking about my experiences playing across the various consoles. And let me just get that out of the way. This thing just works. It works on PlayStation, it works on Xbox, and I currently have it plugged into my PC right now. You can see the indicator lights are currently on, and it works just fine. It was plug and play, no drivers or anything like that. Everything immediately detected it as a keyboard and a mouse. So if you're playing a game, you have to go into the game settings and say, this is a keyboard and mouse. If you do not have that setting or that option on your game, it will not work. It'll say, hey, the controller isn't detected, even though you think it is. It's really a keyboard and a mouse. Okay, so getting that part out of the way. How did it perform? How did it feel? I actually grew to like it. I gotta admit, at first I was skeptical because I am so used to playing everything with a conventional controller, having a dedicated analog stick and having another dedicated analog stick. The form factor, just I'm used to that. But my muscle memory did have to slightly kind of recalibrate in order to use this controller effectively, but I did get good at it at the end. And the one challenge I would pose to you before I really get into my thoughts on the form factor, go play any first-person shooter that you have, any of them, and go find a mountain range or something complex and try to trace it with your reticle. So go down iron sights or hip fire, it doesn't matter, and try to draw that shape the best you can with a controller. And I think you're going to find that it's not perfect. I think you're going to find you're overshooting both horizontally and vertically. And I think you're also going to find that when you try to do the same thing again with a conventional mouse, you're going to be much more accurate. And that is where this controller shines. Since this is a touchpad, you are actually drawing with incredible granularity when you are manipulating games. And most games have very limiting sliders on the aim portion of a controller. Typically, you have sensitivity like 0 to 7. Sometimes I've seen like 0 to 8 or 9. As opposed to a mouse, you typically have 0 to 100, which includes things like mouse acceleration, sometimes even mouse sensitivity, overall sensitivity. So there are options, smoothing. I just said mouse sensitivity, mouse smoothing. So there are layers of options on a mouse that you will never get with a controller. And I think that is where this controller really shines. I was really impressed with the amount of precision I was able to get with a touchpad using my thumb, holding the controller like this and using the touchpad to manipulate my character. And that was awesome. I really, really liked that. One thing I will point out is that the analog stick here is kind of a misleading analog stick. It's really just mapped to WASD. It doesn't really truly map in kind of a more traditional analog cardinal direction. It's just a digital cross. So keep that in mind as well. But it didn't really hinder my gameplay. It just meant I had to rely more on my touchpad for more of the precision aiming, particularly in events when I was circle strafing or when I was trying to keep looking at a target and trying to always maintain, directly looking at something, right? Like a tank turret. So keep that in mind as well. Now, in terms of like how it functioned, as I said, it works exactly the way you think that it should, and I appreciated that. I was a little sad it doesn't include a vibration function. I think that's something that I would like to see in future iterations. I know a lot of professional gamers don't like the vibration function on their controller. I love it. I love using a big, heavy chain gun or some sort of cannon in shooting and feeling the thump, thump, thump in my hands. I love that. And that's why I love the DualSense controller so much, particularly with that haptic feedback on the controller or the actual trigger buttons. Here, you don't get any of the vibration at all. The trade-off, I guess, is that it's incredibly lightweight. Like, you're not even going to realize you're holding it. It is so incredibly thin and almost hollow feeling, which I don't think takes away from the build quality. I mean, I put this thing through its paces, really, and it held up. The buttons they're responsive. The mouse wheel works. It's clicky. It's tactile. The trigger buttons at the top to shoot left and right, spamming space or shift to run around, all worked very, very well. Didn't have any issues. There was no ghosting or any sort of missed inputs or anything like that. So I have to maintain, or at least I would maintain, that the build quality is fine. Now, in terms of the actual functionality, for the most part, I think it worked really, really well. Again, on the D-pad, you have your numbers mapped 1, 2, 3, 4. Very easily to call in kill streaks or to switch weapons. Where I struggled was with these buttons down here in the corner, the C, R, V, and F keys. Because when you're holding the controller, if you're like me and you got big bear paws, when you're holding the controller, your thumb is going to be on the touchpad, obviously. But to get down to the C or the V, you're going to have to take your hand almost off the touchpad, and look where the rest of my hand goes. It basically has to pull away from the controller. So it was not easy for me to quickly press those buttons, and I actually remapped them to some of the function buttons on the left D-pad. Again, being that it's a controller, you could remap anything to anything, which is awesome. You don't have to be assigned to what the game recommends for you to do. You could change it to any key that you want. And I like that because I did find that I did not personally use any of those buttons down at the bottom. I did not really use the mouse wheel much either. The only time I use those, honestly, is in times like now where my controller is laying flat on my desk and I'm using my index finger actually as another mouse input, like a touch screen, and I'm manipulating my cursor that way. Sometimes I would scroll down and highlight something and I'd press like the C or the V. That's the only time that I would ever use that. So to me, if you are a little bit bigger-handed person like I am, you may not want to use those buttons. You may want to remap them. Excluding that, the buttons on the back, the way the spacing was, the way the mouse buttons were laid out on the top, even the really nice E button and the Q button here at the top for additional button presses, like manipulating objects, or reloading, or calling out pings, or things like that, all work flawlessly. And I really, really like that. The question I guess I would ask to myself, now that I have kind of gone through the paces with this controller, is this something I would have naturally gravitated to? Or is it one of these things where I felt like, I had to kind of really dedicate craft at it and see if it was something I wanted. And to me, I think most people probably wouldn't take a chance on this because it is so different and so foreign than what they're used to. But I would challenge you to say that for me, at least, my gameplay did improve. I was really surprised about this because of the aim, particularly because of how granular I could get the mouse sensitivity. And I was starting to hit shots that I would not have hit before on a controller. And my tracking, particularly in extended gunfights, when I'm shooting at targets at range as they're moving across a battlefield, like in Warzone or in Apex, where it's kind of sustained fires, you got to burn down their shields and burn down their health and then finish them off when they're knocked. I actually did significantly better using this controller than my tried and true DualSense Edge controller or my Xbox Elite Series 2 controller. And that's why I do ultimately recommend this, despite the fact that I think the button placement on this controller isn't really the best. And there are definitely, I think, room for future modifications, like maybe wireless at some point, maybe vibrations at some point. But even if those don't exist, and this is the only variant of this controller, I think you may want to try it. I really do. And I think that the functionality here is so unique and different that it didn't feel like a challenge to me because I was very familiar with keyboard and mouse gaming. But really taking that form factor and shrinking it way down into something that was actually handheld. It was a very novel concept. And after getting this as a review, kind of looking around online and trying to see if other controllers replicated this functionality and not really finding it. So if you're somebody who wants that like ultimate precision, I think you want to invest in something like this. If you're somebody who is okay with maybe not perfect gameplay, that's probably not the right word, but knowing that your targets are your shots are most likely going to sway because an analog stick is not going to give you that level of precision, this may not be for you. But considering it's got a long USB cord, it's priced at a pretty competitive price to other existing controllers out there, and that it has a lot of versatility in particular games. Again, keep in mind, it's got to be the game that does support keyboard and mouse support. I do recommend it. So that wraps up my video review of the DARKWALKER Shotpad Touchpad. I hope you guys found this video interesting and informative. If you have any other questions about this review, please leave a note in the comments below and I will get back to you. I think this is a product that definitely has its place amongst some of the great gaming controllers that I have worked my way through over the 35 years plus that I've been gaming. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.